Good afternoon, Salt Lake City. This is Talk with Ted, a show about nothing, number 20. So I think I've been at it for about 5 months now, and we've got a special show today because I've got sitting to my left a man that helped change my life, Chad Blythe, the father of Boy Scout and a young man with Down syndrome who is a remarkable inspiration to anyone that's ever met him. And Logan Blythe is a special kid, and Chad is here today to share with us, give us an update on how Logan's doing, and we're going to talk a little bit about that case and learn about Logan and the Boy Scouts of America, talk about them, talk about the LDS Church leaving the Boy Scouts of America. We're going to talk about girls now being admitted to and joining and participating in the Boy Scouts of America. So I'm not sure if they're going to change their name or how they're going to handle that. But before we get to Chad, we're going to have on my cousin Clay Patrick McBride, who's a photographer, and Clay's going to join us at 4:20. And I know I can hear you in your car already. A photographer on the radio, that's not going to go over very well, but hopefully Clay will spark some interest in his career, and you can log on to LinkedIn or the internet, and you can learn a lot about Clay. But Clay's a remarkable guy, Clay Patrick McBride, and he's a professor at Rochester Institute of Technology, and he's going to call in for the second segment. So it should be a good show. And it's a little cloudy out there today. I find this time of year it's kind of hard to dress.
Yes.
Because you get the sun comes out and you're too hot, the sun goes behind a cloud, and you're too cold. So it's that time of year. It's a great time to do some spring skiing too. And I've got a buddy in town that just landed about an hour ago. Shout out to Matt Boyle and his beautiful wife Beth. And they're out here staying up at Deer Valley through the weekend to celebrate her 50th birthday. And I think they've got 12 or 14 people that are going to join them. And that doesn't include me, but I'll be at that party as well. So welcome to town, Maddie. It'd be great to see you. And again, my name's Ted McBride. I'm an attorney from New York, a bit of a transplant. I moved to Utah in 1997, a long time ago now, and in anticipation of the 2002 Winter Games. And aren't we lucky here in Utah knowing that the Olympics will return to Utah?
Oh, yes.
In either, I think it's 2028 or 2032, but we're going to have another shot at the Olympics. And the first one was just awesome. And Utah has changed considerably, if not dramatically, since then. And I mentioned this last week. When I moved to Utah, the population was 2 million people. And Park City was a tiny little town that had a concert in the park at the old Miners Hospital every Wednesday night. Well, probably 15 years ago, they had to move that concert up to Deer Valley, where they could accommodate many more people. And Park City's growing, Summit County's growing, every place is growing. There's still one little quiet spot that reminds me of Vermont, though, and that's Morgan, Utah. And I think Morgan, Utah will be the next Park City. Positioned right there between the Great Snow Basin and, of course, the other resorts down this way. And I hope to get out and do a little bit of skiing before the snow all melts. I haven't done enough of it this year. And I'm very grateful to be here today. I had a little bit of a scary experience the other day. My mother's listening. She may not know yet. But I was involved in a bit of a car accident that was a little bit frightening on Friday evening, and I managed to total my beautiful Dodge Charger, but I came out with just a scratch on my wrist. And it's just that at any moment life can throw you a curveball, and you got to be ready for them and be grateful for every moment that we've got. And I've got a couple of people in the studio. I got my sound man Alan Anderson. I couldn't do it without him, as well as my sister Kathy McBride, who's out here helping me out and visiting, and she'll hopefully see Matt and Beth as well. So how's that for a start? I know not much of one, you're probably thinking. But if you're out there on the road, be careful. Don't get mad at the truck drivers. We've got great industry here in Utah, and they're lugging minerals around, and the trains are going by, and there's a lot of traffic on the roads, especially at rush hour. Now is rush hour, and so be safe out there, and let's not fight over the road space. Speaking of fighting, my show last week I spoke quite a bit about the Russell Westbrook NBA incident and the Utah fan base. And I think fan base is accurate because it's not just Jazz games. But there was an incident involving the great Russell Westbrook, the all-star guard from the Oklahoma City Thunder. And he was involved in an altercation with a fan, a verbal altercation. And the fan had said something to the effect of "get on your knees," and Russell Westbrook had a bit of a visceral response and had some words to say, and Russell was fined $25,000. And we spoke all about that last week. And since that show, I've had the opportunity to share that link with some people in the NBA, as well as with the Oklahoma City Thunder organization. And I hope that Russell Westbrook has had an opportunity to listen to that show, because in it, I tried to do a little bit of an apology on behalf of us fans here in Utah that are stigmatized by the activities of a few, and it's really hurting all of us. But those activities date back far more than just last week. And I had spoken about the incident with Derek Fisher, the great Derek Fisher, and many people may recall Derek Fisher played for the Los Angeles Lakers, and then he was here on the Jazz for a period of time. And he had a daughter that suffered from a rather serious medical condition with respect to her eye. I think she had some sort of eye cancer. And Derek Fisher had a heroic playoff game for us, for the Jazz, where he came in and checked in the third quarter, hit a shot to force the game into overtime, in which the Jazz won, and he was a real hero here. Then, after that season ended, he had requested of the great Larry Miller, he asked for permission out of his contract. And what a big heart that guy Larry Miller had, that he did that. And he let Derek Fisher out of his contract so that Derek Fisher could be closer to medical facilities, whether it was he was going to go to New York or Los Angeles, where he could get the more appropriate care for his daughter, and it would be much easier for him than being here in Utah. And Larry Miller did the right thing and let him out. And then after that, and when I say did the right thing, he did just the high ground moral thing. What a great thing for Larry Miller to do. And then Derek Fisher came back to our great state in a playoff game, and he was heckled by fans, and there was some rumor that they were actually chanting cancer, the cancer chant. And while he was shooting foul shots, a heckler covering one eye and ridiculing his sick daughter. And we can't forget about these things here in Utah, and we've got to try to ensure that they don't happen again, because for some reason or another, the fans in this state seem to leave a bit of the moral code at the ticket gate going into that Delta Center, and it's wrong, and it's got to stop. It's got to stop. And I don't care, there's some debate whether last week's incident was racial or not. That's kind of beside the point. It was nasty, if nothing else. And it doesn't have to be racist to be completely offensive. And it was just that. It was completely offensive. So why do we do that here in Utah? What does that emanate from? And it's a little hard to really put the finger on it. But I know that one thing that has bothered me here in Utah in my 20 plus years of enjoying this beautiful place and our sporting events is the BYU Utah football game. And they stopped playing that football game, the Holy War they call it, but they actually had to stop playing it for a little while. And then just last year, thank you, Al. Just last year, there was a joint press release done by the athletic directors of the University of Utah and Brigham Young leading up to this game. And I want to read you that joint press release and ask, why do we have to have a joint press release to ask people in this state to respect each other in leading up to and watching a football game? But this is what they did then, just this last fall. Dear rivalry fans, As the athletics directors at Utah and BYU, we are teaming up to ask our fans to treat each other in this game with the respect it deserves as one of the longest rivalry series in the country. These are two great universities. Families and fans on both sides deserve a positive experience within and around Rice-Eccles Stadium. There is incredible tradition, passion, and excitement surrounding the BYU-Utah rivalry, so let's make it fun for all as we cheer on our respective teams. Please enjoy pregame activities responsibly and be nice to your neighbors in the stadium. Remember, safety is in everyone's best interest and is our top priority. Two great football games will battle it out on the field, and they ask that that battle be kept there. And that's a great thing that those athletic directors did, but it's unfortunate that it even has to come to that. But it's that mentality that then carries over into that arena in the NBA. And I think that the people in the NBA, I've got a bunch of new friends on LinkedIn, a friend of me on LinkedIn. I'm trying to work my way into the NBA, might keep my dream alive. But you're laughing, right?
No, not at all. I'm not laughing whatsoever. I'm completely serious.
So am I. But it's that mentality that we have here, even against one another, carries over into the NBA. And then you can understand why those great players are a bit reluctant to come here, certainly to play on our team, because you look at some of the articles and the experiences that many people have had in coming to the Delta Center, the Vivint home arena. There's something more going on here. It's not just the NBA. And I point back to this rivalry game, Utahns against Utahns just being awfully nasty to each other and taking this fight around this football game to, I think, do things and say things and act in a manner that they know they shouldn't be doing. And we really need to just take a step back and stop hurling insults at one another. And let's get to a place where our athletic directors don't have to ask us to be cordial to one another, or our NBA owners, the great Gail Miller. It puts her in a terrible position, just a terrible position. And my heart goes out to Gail Miller and to the Jazz organization, because there's so many great people here and so many great loyal fans and decent people, but it's a few that spoil it, and it really is a few too many. So I'm hoping that with that awareness that we can all appreciate that we Utahns aren't helping anyone or anything by being so hard on one another in the context or under the veil of sports. I got to change topics, or I'll be repeating last week's show, right, Alan?
You're good.
We have on the basketball front, there was a Jimmer sighting this week, and it didn't take place in China. Jimmer Fredette is back in town. Of course, he signed a couple-of-year deal with the Phoenix Suns, and he was here just last night, I think. And Jimmer went 1 for 10, but I'm going to give him a break. I got to think he's a little jet-lagged, right? But I think the rim is the same height in China as it is here in the U.S., and I think that the three-point line is probably the same. But congratulations to Jimmer Fredette, and I know that there's a lot of happy people in Utah to see him again, because that kid is sensational, and we wish him well and can't wait to see him and follow him again. I didn't make it to the game last night, but I'm certainly going to read those headlines and see how the Jimmer was doing. He did get up 10 shots, so that's pretty good.
That's pretty good.
Jimmer's not afraid to shoot. I wouldn't be either if I had his accuracy. We're almost through the first break. I'm going to have my cousin Clay Patrick McBride call in, and Clay's a photographer from New York City, now living up in Rochester, New York, and next month he'll be, at the end of April, he'll be outside of Philadelphia with Allen Iverson. And Clay took an iconic picture of Allen Iverson for Slam magazine back in 1999, in which the answer had his afro taken out, his cornrows taken out, and he had a red, white, and blue basketball, and it was a throwback to Dr. J. And that was at a time when Slam magazine was sort of just getting new and off the ground, and I think Jay-Z was behind Slam magazine. But Clay has been a photographer to the stars. He's been on the cover of Sports Illustrated, Slam Magazine, People Magazine, Parade Magazine, and he's got some stories to tell, and it was his father that I learned how to practice law from. And that's how I was able to help the Blythe family from the great teachings of my great Uncle Jack. So stay tuned, and hopefully we'll be on the phone with Clay Patrick McBride right when we get back. Welcome back to Talk with Ted. That was my cousin Clay we've got on the line, but hang on, let's keep him off one more second. We'll get to him in just 1 second. Welcome back to Talk with Ted. It is Tuesday, March 26, 424, and I've got in the studio with me Chad Blythe, Logan Blythe's father, and I represented Chad and Logan last year in a case against the Boy Scouts of America. Chad's boy, Logan, suffers from Down syndrome, but is remarkable inspiration, and we had a beautiful experience together, and we're going to talk about that in the second hour. Right now, I'm going to bring in my cousin Clay Patrick McBride. Clay, can you hear me?
Yeah, how am I coming through, Ted?
Oh, there you are, Clay Patrick McBride. Okay. We've got no. You sound just right. How are you, cuz?
I'm doing just terrific today. Thanks for asking. Stoked to be on the show.
It's great to have you on. The McBride men. Now we have Clay's brother is a magician, and I think that he's probably the least famous of the three of us. Clay, don't you agree?
I don't know. He's like the Michael Jordan of magicians.
Yeah, I know.
He's not just a magician.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, he's the alpha and the omega when it comes to magic.
Yeah, and he was basically famous by the time he was 16, 17 years old. Your brother and my cousin Jeffrey, isn't that right?
That's correct, man. He was an incredible role model, an incredible power of example, an incredible shadow to be in.
Yeah, for sure. And he was on. We watched him last year on Penn and Teller fool us, and he fooled them. He didn't fool me, Clay. Did he fool you?
Well, Ted, you did the water bowls, right?
He did the water bowls.
Yeah, to me, it's the performance that.
Oh, I know.
I'm just kidding. Trick is so good.
Now, I always think back, Clay, to when we were kids and Jeffrey had the magic closet that we weren't allowed in.
Oh, yeah.
Remember the magic closet?
Pandora's. Yeah, it was like Pandora's box or something.
Something terrible was going to happen.
Yeah.
Enough of Jeffrey. Let's talk about you. Why don't you introduce yourself to our folks here in Salt Lake City?
Right on. Hey, Salt Lake City. My name is Clay Patrick McBride, also known as Cleasy McBreezy, CP McBee, Uncle Clyde McBride. Yeah, I got a lot of street names.
Oh, you do? I was unaware.
I'm an artist and an educator and director, photographer, and professor here at the Rochester Institute of Technology in Western New York, up near Buffalo.
Amazing. And how long have you been doing that, Clay? How long have you been a professor?
I've been a professor here in this very serious institution on my 5th year, but before that, I used to teach in the room. I was a student at the School of Visual Arts in New York City. In the very room that I was a student, and many great photographers, even Keith Haring, a graffiti artist, studied at the School of Visual Arts. So,
now what about you had a mentor that had that famous picture from Vietnam.
Yeah. His name was Eddie Adams.
Eddie Adams, and was that the picture with the handgun to the head?
Yeah, and Pulitzer Prize-winning photograph. Really radical guy. Had an incredible career as a photojournalist and later as a commercial and editorial photographer. And he had a big, beautiful. He bought an old bathhouse in New York City and converted it into a fabulous studio and a beautiful residence, and it just sold for $20 million by his widow. Yeah, so.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
What year did he pass away, Clay?
I want to say he passed away about 8 years ago, maybe 10 years ago. Okay. Yeah, so I'm guessing at that.
Okay. Let me back you up a little bit. Your old man was my great mentor, the great John S. McBride. And, of course, you didn't become a lawyer. I did. You probably made a better decision than me, Clay, taking the pictures. But Jack died back in 1999. It's 20 years ago, just a couple of weeks ago, right?
Yeah, wow, I didn't realize that happened in 99.
1999, yeah, because I'd moved to Utah, and there was still some question whether I'd come back. And I like to tell people out here, that if Dad had not passed away, I might have been back there with him full time. My life could have been very different. But Uncle Jack was a great man, and they have lifetime achievement awards named after him. Did you know that Judge Owen retired and that he got the award back there? He got the Jack McBride Lifetime Achievement Award.
I didn't know that.
Yep.
That's great.
Yep. So he's a legend.
Mm-hmm.
I got to tell you one.
Well,
quick...
what I love hearing the stories about how the young lawyers would come in for his summations, and like an empty crowd room would become crowded with these lawyers who were just witnessing his swagger and his closing remarks and stuff like that.
That's true, because they used to hand him the file on Friday to try the case on Monday. Right?
Yeah, I can remember him sitting all weekend in the living room with piles of papers and his reading glasses and just silence,
Now, he also was a little bit of an Irish gangster, too, because, of course, his office was at the Orange Inn in Goshen, New York, next to the courthouse at the old inn. And before cell phones, they installed a telephone line in the corner booth. And Jack would come out of court, go over there to get his lunch, and they'd come out, they'd bring the phone out, plug it in so he could do his other business at lunch. You remember that?
I do. I remember him on that phone very well. And it was a quarter, you got to really describe it, a dark tavern with a mirrored banquette booth in the corner of quilted, tufted leather, well worn.
It was the Irish gangster.
A deep red burgundy, and this guy sitting there, and you could smoke back then. He'd be smoking cigarettes and doing his business, and yeah.
He was a great man, and I feel like I got him on my shoulder every time I go into court. He's whispering something in my ear.
Mm-hmm.
Now, he had a couple of great pieces of advice and philosophies. One thing that Clay used to say, if you had a problem that money can solve, you don't have a problem.
I love that, and I tell myself that whenever I get in a spot.
I do as well. Sometimes I have a hard time believing it, but I say it over and over. He had another great one, Clay, where he bought a Buick back in the 1950s, and it was the fancy car like a Corvette, and he had all kinds of problems with it, breaking down left and right. And he finally sold it for quite a bit less. I think he said the car was $2,000, and he sold it for $1,000. A lot of money back then. And his buddy said, "Hey, you lost $1,000 when you sold that car." And you know what his response was? "I lost $1,000 when I bought that car." And that was his outlook. And I try to think. I think of him often, and I try to put into practice some of the things that he taught us. Do we still have him? Clay, did we lose you?
Still there.
Hang on, we're having a little technical difficulty.
Clay, you there?
We lost Clay. Let's try to get him to call back here. While Clay calls back in, I'm going to read from his bio so we know who we're talking with. Or do we have him, Alan?
Okay.
Oh, we got him.
I'm gonna put you on.
Got your back, cuz?
No.
Bought a Buick.
Oh, we got
bought
you.
a Buick,
We got
and
you
I
back.
lost you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Bought a Buick.
He bought a Buick.
Bought a Buick, had problems with it, sold it for a loss. His friend said, "You lost money when you sold it." He said, "No, I lost money when I bought it." Doesn't that sound like him?
It does. And he didn't give me much life advice, but he said, always work for yourself.
Ah, interesting.
He didn't tell me what to do. He didn't tell me to be a lawyer. And, it's one of the things he told me, And,
So did you take that advice? You've made yourself into a bit of something.
Yeah, most of my life I've been a freelance operator and working, check to check, job to job for a number of clients, and that's been awesome. But now I work for the man here at a very prestigious institution that's very conservative, and And I hear him in my head sometimes when I'm in these bureaucratic meetings, you know, and
What's he
I
telling
feel
you?
like I feel like a bull in a china shop, first of all. But yeah, he's telling me, you know, like, oh, I feel like I'm working for Michael Gerda or something, you know, like
Yeah.
like I'm working for somebody else, you know, and
Well,
but-
you're teaching kids. What kind of classes are you teaching there, Clay?
I teach advertising classes.
Oh,
I like to teach. Yeah, I teach advertising photography classes for third and fourth year, mostly upperclassmen. I teach them how to get ready their portfolio, how to work on a large scale production. I teach different concepts of advertising. I also teach lighting classes about studio lighting and very complex strobes and sort of how to master and control light. You know, so those are the classes I'm teaching.
to
Up here. I teach
master and
video
control
making
light.
and stuff like that. Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And you're the photographer to the stars, and the NBA in particular. You've taken a
Let me just go back and tell one more story
Yeah, go for
about Dad before we leave Dad, because you asked me to tell a story,
go
and
for
it was at his wake, and I was standing there, and this judge walks up to me. It was Judge Williams, and he says, "You're Clay, right?" And usually it was like, "Aren't you the magician?" My whole life, "Are you Jeff the magician?" But this guy was like, "You're Clay, right?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And he's like, "The photographer." And I'm like, "Yeah." He goes, "I want to tell you something. Your dad used to carry around a copy of Time magazine that you shot the cover of. And if I had a dime for every time you showed me that magazine, I'd probably have about $3 in my pocket." He said, "I want you to know that every time he took out that magazine, I acted as if I never saw it. Because what I saw was a man who was really proud of his son. And I never wanted to take that away from Jack. I always acted like I was seeing it for the first time. And I want you to know, Clay, your dad was so proud of you." And this came to me, you know, from beyond the grave. It was like my dad was telling me, he was giving me a huge pat on the back through Judge Williams, and it was beautiful.
Yeah. Well, you know,
Yeah.
I was with your dad when you were down in school,
Yeah.
down in New York City, cranking it out, and I can tell you that he was awfully proud of you then too. Before you got on the cover of Time magazine, what was on that cover, Clay? Do you recall?
It was Lady Di and Dodie. It was the crash of Lady Diana, and it was a collage I made of existing pictures.
Oh, I remember that one.
Yeah.
Sure. And that predated your Allen Iverson cover, Slam magazine.
It did. That was probably 97, and then Allen Iverson was 99, and it's just such a trip that was the year that Dad passed, and that was the year I made that photograph. I never would have considered those two things happening in the same year.
And now it's the 20-year anniversary of that photograph, right?
Yep. So
Yeah.
yes, and for the people out there, let's paint a picture of it.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's 1999. I'm working for Slam magazine, which is the sort of in-your-face street culture basketball magazine. And there's a basketball strike, and we rolled to
Oh, that's
Philadelphia. Yep, we rolled to Philadelphia, and we're going to photograph Allen Iverson, and we have a concept. The concept is to photograph him as a homage to Dr. J. So we're going to take out his braids. We're going to comb out his afro. We're going to put him in a throwback jersey. And at the time, Mitchell & Ness is a company that makes collectible $400 jerseys for sports enthusiasts. They weren't even on the map yet. So we helped put Mitchell & Ness on the map when we put Iverson in this classic Philadelphia throwback Mitchell & Ness jersey, red, white, and blue, and we put him with the ABA ball, so he'd look like the old red, white, and blue Spalding ball with the Dr. J afro and this throwback jersey, and we made a really important image in Allen Iverson's career and in sports history. Yeah.
Yeah, a really iconic picture, right? And a series of pictures, really.
A whole photo shoot, and it was tremendous. one thing that's funny is I waited. I was down there with a creative director and an editor, and I waited. I guess 13 hours for Allen Iverson to show up.
He
He
was
was 13
hours late.
So, yeah, and I realized I didn't know why these guys were with me, because usually when I go to shoot a job, it's just me by myself. But these guys were with me, I think, to just sit on me and make sure I didn't leave and that I came back with some pictures, because I probably would have left after 5 hours or 7 hours,
Now, I thought I read there's an article just recently. Where did I see that, Clay?
ESPN's Undefeated just wrote a big feature on the anniversary of the photograph.
And that story says much about you as it is Allen Iverson.
Yeah, it is. It's kind of my side of the story and my perspective. And I met a great writer, Jerry Bumber, and he wrote the article, and he really just celebrated my perspective and the significance of the picture. So it was beautiful.
Now, great picture, but I got to tell you, if I were doing it, I think I would have had the light a little different, cuz.
Oh, you're funny.
Because
Yeah,
that's what he's
I-
saying in the article, right? You're critical of yourself about the lighting, right?
Yeah, I mean, you look back, and I was just, I was just starting to learn stuff. It takes a good 10 years to really learn how to light.
10 years.
And I think so, to really know and understand how to light something. And I was maybe 5 or 7 years in at that point, so I knew a thing or two, but I didn't know the things I know now. So, but what's exciting is there's talk about going to the Allen Iverson Round Ball Classic in Philadelphia.
Clay,
on
we're
the third
going
week.
we're going into a commercial. You may not
Okay.
be able to hear it, but when we come back, we're going to talk about the Allen Iverson Round Ball Classic next month. And,
Beautiful.
So, Clay, hang on, stay with us. We'll be back in just a couple
Okay,
minutes.
great.
Welcome back. It's Talk with Ted, a show about nothing. Number 20, and I've got on the phone my homie laughing here, my dear cousin and best friend, Clay Patrick McBride. How are you, cuz?
I'm great. Funny,
Again,
it's a show about nothing.
thanks for joining us. Just do a play on old Seinfeld. I love the Seinfeld show, but I've had a great time, Clay. You're the second college professor I've had on. I had on a law professor from up at the University of Utah with a great topic, and it's just been great having this show, and it's great having you on. Before we went off on the break, you started to tell us about the Allen Iverson Round Ball Classic. Why don't you pick it up from there?
Yeah, it's in the third week of April, and it's in Philadelphia. He has his own like sort of high school tournament. It's not a tournament; it's the Round Ball Classic, and he gets the best high school players from the area to come around. I think from all over the country to come play in this tournament. And Iverson himself hosts it, and we're talking about recreating the classic 1999 image, 20 years later. So we're hoping to make that happen. In fact, I have to have a call with these guys later today to see if we can just work out the logistics.
Good, and you got to let me know if I need to buy my own tickets, because I'm going to be there.
Okay, I will, sir.
I'm coming. And
Okay.
the great Baron Davis is the coach of one of the teams.
And Steven Jackson, or who's the other coach?
Steven Jackson?
There's 2 coaches.
Steven Jackson.
Yeah, I believe.
Yep, Steven
Steven
Jackson.
Jackson.
Yeah. Amazing. How did you get involved with Slam Magazine? And, well, first, give us some names, some NBA names. Drop a few names here of some of the players that you've taken pictures of.
Of course, White Chocolate, Jason Williams, Jason Kidd, Steve Nash with the long hair, Kevin Garnett, Ray Allen, Gary Payton, Vince Carter, Richard Jefferson, Dikembe Mutombo. God, I'm blanking out.
LeBron. I'll add a few. LeBron.
Yeah, LeBron, Stephon Marbury,
Kobe.
yeah. And Kobe. Yeah, those two, the goats, right?
Larry Bird.
Larry Bird, Ron Artest.
You had Larry Bird
yeah.
and Ron Artest on the cover of Sports Illustrated, didn't you?
Yeah, together when they were at the Pacers.
And you've missed the one that you told me was the nicest guy in the NBA. Do you remember telling me who the nicest guy in the NBA was?
Oh my God, Paul Pierce.
Paul Pierce.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's a true gentleman and a true class act. Totally. I worked with him for Pepsi once. Worked with him for Nike. Took some great pictures of him, and I think he's underrated. He's a phenomenal player.
Oh, he was amazing.
Uh-huh.
What's your favorite story? And then we'll get to the Round Ball Classic again. But what's your favorite story among the NBA photogs?
Oh, I don't. Well, you know what's funny is I had a friend. It's a complicated story, but I had a friend who really loved basketball, and we used to play. How I got into basketball was through this video game called the NBA 2K, which is for the Sega Dreamcast, and I learned all the players, and I used to play the Portland Trailblazers, and I used to score like crazy with Sabonis, and anyway, so I got into, because he had a 3-point shot and it would destroy people, and I got into basketball through this video game, and it was the year 2000, and
you never came to watch me, did you?
I did. I saw you play some high school games, for sure.
Okay,
Everyone was so proud of you.
Go on, back to you.
All it did was emasculate me because I had no game. So my friend, his name's Joey, and he married this crazy girl from Paraguay, and she left him, and this kid loves basketball like it's nobody's business. And who does she leave him for? Steve Nash.
Steve Nash, I knew that.
Steve Nash. And what year is it? It's the year that Steve Nash gets elected MVP. Not once, but twice, 2 years in a row, he was elected MVP, I think. And so Steve Nash, could you imagine what's worse than your wife leaving you than leaving you for an MVP baller when you love the game of basketball?
That's got to hurt.
So that hurt. And what's funny is I'm walking down my street one time, and I see Alejandra, and I see her, and I say, and I know immediately his back is to me, but I know it's Steve Nash. And I say, hey, Alejandra, how are you? And she's really nice and charming to me, gives me a kiss and a hug. And I say, she goes, oh, this is my boyfriend. And I go, you're going to introduce me to Steve Nash? And I said, of course I know who this dude is, right? And so I say, hey, you know what? I bet you I'm going to be photographing you next week because I photograph basketball players. Wouldn't you know it? Next week, randomly, I go to Canada, and I'm photographing Steve Nash, and I couldn't believe it. Like, we both were like, get the hell out of here. And so I photographed Steve Nash, and what's amazing is he's like as good a soccer player as he is a basketball player, and he was doing all those soccer, like the juggling moves with his feet the whole time I was photographing him. It was phenomenal.
Really?
But
is he the only NBAer to do that?
The only one I've seen do, like drop the ball and then kick it with his feet and bounce it right back to himself. And like if he could pass with his feet, he'd probably be unstoppable.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Hey, aside from the NBA, you're also the photographer to a lot of rock stars.
Yeah, I've loved music my whole life, and that was really all I wanted to do was photograph musicians and be on the covers of CDs and magazines. So, yeah, I've worked with everyone from Dolly Parton to Metallica to Wynton Marsalis to Slayer, to Neil Young. I photographed him in Utah, right?
You were out. He was at Sundance.
Yeah.
You stayed with me that year, right?
I did. I stayed with you. We went snowshoeing. It was a great day.
Up in Uintas. And if I recall, that was for Parade Magazine.
It was, and it was like classic 10-minute photo shoot. And Neil Young walks into the room with all his entourage and people, and I start talking to him, and I'm playing him some music. I was like, hey, I want to play you some music. And my friend, who's really influenced by you, and he's listening, and we're talking a little bit. And his blowhard manager, Elliot something or other, he goes, you got 10 minutes, right? And I said, dude, I know I'm going to have 10 minutes, but when am I ever going to speak to Neil Young again in my life? I said, I'm going to talk to him for 5 minutes.
That's awesome.
And photograph him for 5 minutes. And Neil Young thought it was so funny because I checked his manager, who probably parades him around all day to meetings like this, and we immediately connected over that. It was really funny.
That's great. Hey, one more I got to drop out there. Kid Rock.
Kid Rock's been a great client for over 20 years. I've done, probably every album cover, with exception of the first one, Devil Without a Cause. I didn't shoot that one, but he's been a great client. And
you even had his
wonderful
Trans Am at one point in time.
Yeah, I did. I bought a Trans Am that that was a part of his, Smokey and the Bandit, black and gold, 80-something Trans Am. It was gas guzzling beast, a beauty.
Now, Clay, I think in addition to the Allen Iverson photo, you also did a shoot with Jay-Z and Kanye West in the White House. What was that one about?
That was 2004 when Jay-Z had become president of Def Jam Records, which, when I follow Jay-Z's career, what I'm most interested in is this idea that he's trying to create black wealth, and he's trying to create a new economy for the African-American community. And just the power of example he is as somebody who's gone from the projects, Marcy Projects in Brooklyn, to becoming the CEO of a huge company, Def Jam, was such a milestone that we conceived this idea that we would shoot it in the style of JFK, the Camelot era of the White House. And so I reenacted a bunch of iconic pictures shot by Hank Walker and other famous Time Life photographers, and I recreated the Oval Office. We built an Oval Office at a photo studio in Midtown Manhattan called Pier 59, and it cost about $40,000 to build this crazy set. We built it one day, we photographed it one day, and then we tore it all down the next day. So it was up for like 48 hours or something.
That's amazing. Well, those are some great pictures.
Thank you.
Who's the one of the rapper in the church, the gold church? He's got his arms extended. That's my favorite.
Oh, thanks. That's Rick Ross, Ricky Rose. He's a Florida rapper. He was a prison guard before he was a rapper. He's Rick Ross. He's a boss. And the album was called "God Forgives I Don't." So,
yeah, that's great. And what about you got something going on now with Norah Jones?
Yeah, I worked with Norah Jones very early in her career and photographed a number of albums for her back in the early 2000s. And now, many years later, she returned to me, and this is after, I felt like she outgrew me, and she went and worked with all my favorite photographers, people who I really respect and admire, like Danny Clinch and Frank Ockenfels, and guys I really look up to in the business, and then she came back with this album, and I think she wanted to go back to her roots, and she came back to me. I photographed her in Dumbo, Brooklyn in January, and the record will be released coincidentally on the same day that I'm doing my artist talk. It's called National Record Day. It's April 13th. So that's just right around the corner. Her new record will come out, and I did a really beautiful sort of moody double exposure of her for the cover of it.
Awesome. And what do you have then? You have something in New York City on April 13th? What is that?
I do. Again, I'm celebrating the 20th anniversary of the Allen Iverson Slam cover. I'm doing an artist talk at my gallery. My gallery is called the Morrison Hotel Gallery. They represent a lot of great music photographers over the years, like Mick Rock and Jim Marshall, and it's kind of like the Hall of Fame for rock photographers. So there's pictures of, my picture of Jay-Z is hanging next to the very iconic picture of Jim Morrison with his shirt off. It's hanging right next to
that's so cool, dude.
the very famous picture of Johnny Cash giving the finger. And so I'm doing an artist talk there, and we were going to release this 20th anniversary box set of the Allen Iverson cover, which will have a bunch of merchandise in it for collectors of the sneaker culture. And
you got one reserved for me, right?
I do. There'll only be 50, and one's got your name on it.
Okay,
Ted.
Thanks, Cuz. Hey, I've got in the studio Chad Blythe. He's the father of Logan Blythe. I had that case last year with the Boy Scouts where the boy with Down syndrome had been approved for his Eagle Project. which was then sort of harshly ripped away from him. And I know that you and I spoke about this a little bit earlier, but what involvement, you have something to do with the Special Olympics, or I'd asked you if you taught any disabled kids. Elaborate on that for a minute.
Well, coincidentally, RIT is one of the largest schools for the deaf and hard of hearing community. So we definitely have a lot of hearing impaired and deaf students in my classes. We have sign language all over campus. It's a great community for that. But recently at my school, we did a special project for the second year with the Special Olympics here in Western New York, and we worked with the photojournalism crew, and I brought a couple great students out to photograph portraits of these athletes who are tremendous, who just have a tremendous commitment to sport and to competition. And it's really beautiful to see how people who could let their circumstances close a lot of doors in their lives, just see them push through and really excel in being superstars. We photographed ice skating. It was just a tremendous, heartwarming day. And at the end of it, we had a big show, and we printed some large photographs, and the athletes were taking the photographs right off the wall and going home with them. And it was beautiful to see how much joy photography could bring to this community, and how we're able to celebrate their commitment to sport and to competition.
Well, you got Chad Blythe here nodding his head with a smile on his face. So I think thank you. And now I'm overrunning the commercials. I know you got to go teach a class. Thanks for joining us, cuz.
Thanks for having me, Ted. And thank you, Mr. Blake, for your help to my cousin Ted.
You betcha.
And I'll see you in a few weeks outside of Philadelphia.
Thanks, Ted. Bye-bye.
Okay, take care. We're overrunning the commercial. Talk with Ted. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Talk with Ted, a show about nothing, number 20. Logan Blythe versus the Boy Scouts of America. And I've got to my left Logan Blythe's father, Chad Blythe. How are you, Chad?
Doing pretty good. How about yourselves?
I'm excellent. Thank you for coming down. And we're going to talk about Logan here in a minute, but I want to just do a little recap here at the top of the hour. Okay, so it's 5:07 drive time on Tuesday, March 26th. So now the roads are getting filled up to here at I-15 in particular. Gets awfully congested at rush hour. And if you're on I-15 listening, two hands on the wheel. Because you can find my shows on Facebook, Ted McBride. I'm on Facebook. I'm on LinkedIn. You can find them on the K-Talk website. And there's a bunch of them going back. And it's some interesting stuff. I did one last month about the separation of church and state. And a very interesting show called "Which is the Brightest Star?" That's had a lot of views, and there's some interesting stuff. So you can, if you're not able to listen to the whole show, there's ways to download the MP3 files. And I've got a great guest coming up next week. Many people know that I represent our former 3-term Attorney General Mark Shurtleff, who is not only my client but a close friend of mine. I love the guy. And we do a show together on Thursdays called Common Ground. And Mark, I don't think, is going to be here this Thursday, so I'll be doing Common Ground on my own. But Mark was charged with several crimes, 8 counts of basically bribery and corruption in connection with his service as the Attorney General. And he was publicly disgraced, ridiculed, humiliated by those allegations. And ultimately, they were dismissed against him. And next week, I've got a commitment from one of the prosecutors of Mark's case, Troy Rawlings from Davis County. And Troy is involved in going after the opioid manufacturers in connection with overdose deaths and expenses to municipalities. And Troy's been basically a lifetime prosecutor. And being a prosecutor is a tough job with some unique challenges. You can't just totally advocate like you can in some other realms of litigation. There's great responsibility that comes with being a prosecutor. And Troy's going to share his background, history, and experience of being a Utah prosecutor for many, many years. So that's going to be a good one. We're looking at 7 days, 6 days, and 23 hours, and we'll have Troy Rawlings here. So I'm really looking forward to that. And in the news today, I just wanted to give a shout out and a congratulations to Utah law professor Erica George, who's on KSL today, for being appointed the director of the Tanner Humanities Center. And Erica George is a law professor up at the U who's got a great background in human rights, and she's got a report that she's written, Scared at Schools, Sexual Violence Against Girls in South African Schools. And we're lucky to have someone like her in the state, and she's going to be taking up that new position, and we wish her well with that. Back to basketball news. Folks down in Provo may not be happy to see this, but the BYU basketball coach Dave Rose has announced that he'll be stepping down, and that's before the end of his contract, and I don't know what precipitated that, but there'll be a new head coach basketball at BYU, and so we wish them luck with that. And with that, on Thursday, I'll be talking about the Mueller investigation, the Russian collusion investigation. I always want to call him Mueller. My sister corrected me. It's Mueller. But many people are upset that nothing has come of that, that there was this confidential report and a little summary of it released, and that there's really findings of no collusion. I haven't read it yet, but I'm going to familiarize myself with it so that I can speak to it on Thursday. I will say, though, that I am not surprised at all that nothing came of it, because I believe that both sides took advantage of contacts with Russians that were probably, bad intentioned on the Russians' part, but that both sides took opportunities to try to gain an advantage over the other back at our last election with the Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. And so it just doesn't surprise me at all that nothing has come of that. I kind of thought it was a bit of a dog and pony show from the start, but I'm glad that we'll get that behind us, that we can move on, because I think that all of us kind of fell victim to that. We live in this Facebook era, this new age, and who out there wasn't consuming a news story that after the fact we learned may not have been entirely true. And I think that we citizens were consuming that information, and our leaders, whether elected or running for election, were also tempted by receiving information that might give them some advantage. And I think that we hopefully learned a big lesson as a group of Americans, that we can't look to the Russians to gain an advantage over one another. And so even though maybe no impeachment, no indictment out of it, I think it's certainly a learning lesson, and that we'll all have our guard up next year when the elections come around again. With that said, Chad Blythe, you are IT. What's your position over at Holland and Hart?
I'm a technical support analyst for Holland and Hart. I'm basically on staff over there, helping troubleshoot any kind of computer issues and so forth. So I get to deal with the attorneys quite a bit, and all of them, staff, the whole 9 yards.
Is he loud enough, Alan? Holland and Hart is a law firm. They're in more places than just Utah.
Oh, yes. They're all up and down the Rocky Mountains, from Denver, Colorado, all the way up to Anchorage now.
Really?
So they're all over the place. They do a lot of oil and gas.
I was going to say, it's basically an energy law firm, right?
Yes, very true.
So I don't understand anything that anyone does over there. I can pretty much guarantee you that.
Yeah. Well, and being a technical analyst there, I can't say I understand a whole lot of it myself, but from what I've been able to gather, they are, they do a lot of water management, a lot of gas and oil law. They prosecute there seems to be a fascinating thing where states now will basically lay claim to the land under your land. So you could actually only maybe own the top, say, 50 feet of earth.
Really?
And then anything they find underneath it, the state or various oil companies and what have you, will also own parts of that as well.
Now, I think up in Park City, I bought a house up in Park City years ago, or outside in Summit County. But I think up there you don't own the mineral rights.
Right. Yes. Yeah. And that's exactly the same thing. You don't. There's places in Utah. I think it's mostly Utah. I know Idaho is doing this now. Alaska does this now, where the state government actually manages those mineral rights.
So do I have to return the silver nugget that I found in my backyard?
If you don't tell anybody about it, I heard nothing at all. As long as I get half of that nugget. But
yeah, what interesting stuff.
Really, yeah. It's. I guess it's just a way that they can go ahead and monopolize a little bit more on the land.
We live in a very rich state, don't we, Chad?
Oh yes. Oh yes.
I tell people back home the ground is it's full of resources.
Oh yes, very much so. You can't drive through Utah at different times without seeing either an oil refinery, an oil pump somewhere, a mining operation. Especially if you go into southern Utah or out, toward the middle of Utah, you'll see a lot of mining operations that they have.
The coal plants.
Coal plants. There's there's silver mining, especially like around Eureka and so forth. I'm from Payson originally, or live in Payson right now, so Eureka is pretty much on our radar. So you hear a lot of what's gone on, what's happened, what continues to happen.
Yes.
So it's amazing.
I was down in Sandy last night looking at a new car because I wrecked mine. I'm looking at a Dodge Challenger, a little hot
Ford
rod.
Mustang, not Dodge Challenger.
No, Dodge Challenger, sorry. But the train went by, loaded with coal.
Yes.
Big, giant freight train. Mm-hmm. I said to my sister, I said, there it is.
Well, what's interesting there, too, is the Holland and Hart, several of their lawyers have been working with the state of California because Utah sells somewhere around the 90% of its electricity to California. And California has laws now passed where they will not buy electricity that is generated by coal. So like Rocky Mountain Power has been having to retool some power plants. They're going through negotiations on how that much this is going to cost, switching from coal to natural gas or wind or something else along those lines. So I've seen a lot of that transpire, and it's really interesting to see. I mean, we're in a society now where we're, of course, trying to be more green, and it's interesting to see how they're trying to do those things, but at the same time, the net cost of all of that.
Yeah.
It just.
But we'll need it here in the Salt Lake Valley.
Oh yes. Oh boy.
Because it's going to have to be at some point where it's got to be all natural gas because the smog here it can be so oppressive.
Yes, it is. It is just it's nauseous.
It really wasn't that bad this year. We didn't have any of those black weeks.
Right. Yes. Last year, like the year before that, and the year before that, it was just thick.
Can't see the sky for 10 days at a time. Right?
No kidding. Coming out of Ted's from New York. I'm from Chicago, so we're from those major metropolitan areas where you hear a lot about smog and you see a little bit of it. But man, Salt Lake Valley has it blown away and then some.
It can be a thick, dark blanket sometimes.
Yes.
And of course, now there's so much construction going on in this place, isn't there?
Yes, because Salt Lake City Valley is becoming a bigger and bigger population all the time.
Yeah, it's a great place.
Oh yes, yeah. When you take a look outside and you can see $1 million views outside of like a Walmart parking lot or something, you just left going, "Wow, okay, I understand why people want to live here."
And then the economic opportunities we have here.
Yes, that's been ever escalating, especially in the technologies perspective here. One of the coined phrases they have now is the silicone slopes.
Silicone slopes. I was kidding a month or so ago. What happens when we mine all the silicone?
Yes, there you go.
Right? Will there be any skiing left?
Right. But there's large technology companies, Microsoft, Google. We've got a large presence already from Adobe here. They're migrating their way out here. It's just getting too expensive in California.
And is it going to get too expensive here, Chad?
I'm thinking it might.
I worry about that with the
might.
real estate prices just skyrocketing.
Yes.
And
it's starting to compare to Chicago and New York in a lot of ways, and as far as those real estate prices go.
And who would have thought 20 years ago that people would really want to go out of their way to live in Salt Lake City, but it's really become that.
Yeah, it has. It's continuing to grow. It's becoming probably on par with again the Chicago scene or the New York scene as far as plays are concerned, as far as culture is concerned. The Salt Lake City is up and coming, especially when now you've got Tuacahn, of course, and St. George. That's another major attraction as far as plays and so forth are concerned, it's turning into its own mega metropolis, if you will.
It's a great place to ride a motorcycle too, isn't it?
Oh yes.
Do you do that?
Oh yes, yes. My wife has a Harley Davidson Softail. We jokingly, she bought it for her birthday present a couple years ago. I have not hit that age yet. Notice I left that age out, and so I don't have my own yet. But
How could that be?
Yeah.
That doesn't seem fair.
Well,
Although-
she's paved the way, so and her husband can follow in due course.
That's great. Interesting start. We haven't even gotten to your brilliant boy yet, but when we
That's
come
true.
back, I've got Chad Blythe, and we're going to be talking about Logan Blythe and the Boy Scouts and how he's doing today.
All right, great.
Stay tuned. We'll be right back, folks.
Welcome back to Talk with Ted, a show about nothing. And we're going to go ahead and let Chad Blythe talk for a moment, kind of follow up with his perspectives on Utah technology coming to Utah.
Well, yes. So, and thank you, Alan. That was, and just getting as we were mentioning before, we coined that phrase, or used the phrase, the Silicon Slopes, about how much technology is now coming more and more into Utah, and how it's escalating and growing,
Including the
leaps and bounds.
NSA Spy Center.
Yes. Yep. I saw that too. So it's an interesting place to be, to see all this up and coming, and to see it continually grow.
Yeah, it's exploding. Even just going down State Street, you can see the diversity here in Utah, too. You know, we get knocked a little bit because there's not a large African-American population.
Right.
It's only 2% of the population.
Yeah.
But there's quite a bit of diversity here, isn't there, Chad?
Oh, yes, quite a bit. And it's just not, you see a wide variety of just about everybody here. You don't just see African-American. You also see Asian-American. You also see, for lack of a better way, say Europeans, various European ethnic
Eastern
groups here.
Europeans. There's a lot of
Yes.
refugees here, too.
Oh, yes, yes.
Yeah.
Utah has stepped up majorly in that regards, trying to help anybody, especially a lot of the Syrian refugees.
Yep.
So-
And before that, from Bosnia,
Yes. Mm-hmm.
yep, the old Yugoslavia, large Filipino population.
Yes.
There's quite a bit of diversity here.
Yes, quite a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, very much so.
And Salt Lake City is a very liberal city. It's had a Democratic mayor, I think, for 30 years straight,
Yes, from what I've seen, yeah, and I know currently right now they do.
as well as a large gay, lesbian community.
Yes.
And I think more tattoo parlors per capita than anywhere in the U.S.
Yes, it's growing there quite a bit. I've seen you're becoming a rarity if you don't have at least something on.
Have you got one?
No, not yet. Not at all.
Diane? Does Diane have one?
No, actually she doesn't. Surprisingly so, neither of us do.
I think it's time for Diane to get a Harley Davidson tattoo.
Oh, I think so. I think it's already in her blood, so it just might as well come out on her skin.
That's funny. Let's talk about Logan a little bit. You and I met just over a year ago.
Yes.
And describe the circumstances which led you into my office.
Well, what had transpired is over the last maybe 5 to 6 years, we've been working within the Boy Scout organization to help Logan achieve what he could achieve. We went through the various merit badges and so forth. Because Logan has Down syndrome, and particularly he has mental disabilities, so in his instance, he just doesn't comprehend things quite well. He's doesn't have very many physical limitations, but this comprehension, he's right around the cognitive ability of about a 3 to 4 year old.
Is he 16 now?
Yes. Mm-hmm. And if you think about it, when you go through different merit badges that you need to acquire, let's say you have to go on a hike for a mile. When was the last time you could convince a 3-year-old to walk a mile? I don't care how old they are or what physical condition they're in. You just can't do it. So there were limitations. So we worked within his limitations. And we were told the entire time as we were going through different things from the local Boy Scout leadership, don't worry, it'll work out. Just keep right on plugging along. And we did. And when we embrace something as a family, we usually try to just go all out, whether it's Harley Davidson's or Boy Scouts of America or the Special Olympics. We go all out. So we actually got Logan to a point where he could do his Eagle project. we were thrilled. We were ecstatic, and we actually booked the time. We went through and had met with the Utah National Parks Council and had the representatives agree to his whole Eagle project. We were set and ready to go. We took pictures. We were happy, overjoyed. And about 24 hours later, I get an email and a text from them saying, I'm sorry, National has said no. The merit badges that Logan has, quote-unquote, earned, he did not earn. And actually, we've got a printout of it here where they actually say that in the special needs, they actually have to meet the requirements as written. So technically, what happens, of course, if you're not going to walk a mile, you don't meet the requirements.
And they did have accommodations for physically disabled.
Yes, they did. And, of course, Logan doesn't qualify for that because he's not physically disabled. He's mentally disabled.
And they didn't have any accommodations for mentally disabled.
Not at all. They had no kind of accommodations for just, the simple fact, and I think the point we had made before with that is, at some point in time, you just got to accept what the boy can do. And they had not made that accommodation, or in the case of the Boy Scouts here as well, they had not publicized any of those accommodations. One little tidbit there, of course, as maybe many of your listeners might know, the Utah National Parks Council is the second biggest the council of Boy Scouts in the world, second only to Salt Lake's council.
Is that right?
Yeah. So it's for them not to know a vital piece of information that then deflated the whole thing. We went ahead and did his Eagle project without the Boy Scouts' approval. We just went ahead because we had planned to do a bunch of newborn kits for the local hospital there in Payson and distribute those out to the various kids that had special needs or whatever else that were newborns and so forth. So we went ahead and just did that. And then, of course, I met Ted, told Ted my story. And Ted,
and the letters,
and went through, showed him what we were talking about, and Ted's like, "Okay, we've got a case here."
Now, what's interesting about it, and then we'll back up and go over it in a little more detail. But when you came to me, the Boy Scouts, they've been involved in litigation for decades.
Oh yes,
protecting their autonomy, if you will.
Right.
And they are a private institution, not unlike a religious institution, that can create its own rules and can basically discriminate.
Correct.
They weren't employing Logan.
Nope.
So they weren't covered under employment law. But I saw an opportunity with his case, and we sued them on a state cause of action for intentional infliction of emotional distress. Right?
Right.
We really couldn't change the broad national policy with our lawsuit, but we basically claimed that they should have been more upfront with you in the beginning.
Yes.
And not led him along to lead him to believe that he could qualify and earn the Eagle Scout Award.
Correct. Right.
Now, if I believe I'm correct, I told you when we met that it would be over in 6 weeks.
Right, and you were about a week generous on that. It was, I think we were headed over in, 5?
It was over in 5.
It was over in 5.
And it was really over in 2 days.
Right.
Because we filed that lawsuit, and we did a press release, and 48 hours later, you and I and Logan were on Headline News with Erica Hill live
Yes.
TV.
Mm-hmm.
And I had my whole spiel planned about what we would talk about, and Erica Hill told us that the Boy Scouts had changed their policy.
Right. She immediately came right on, and we were all, hey, great. We hadn't heard anything about it. They hadn't come to us. They hadn't mentioned anything to us at all. So it was news flash to us, and I remember you looked at it and like, well, if they have, great, we'll talk to them and discuss it with them and see what they want to do.
Later that day, we were on with Glenn Beck.
Yes.
That was quite a day for us.
Oh, yes, very much so.
And that Glenn Beck interview was a great interview.
Yes, I especially liked his bullet through the foot.
The bullet through the foot. And he was saying that the
was
Boy
great.
Scouts were shooting themselves in the foot.
Right.
And we basically prevailed in that case because of the public outcry that followed the filing of our lawsuit.
Yes, we actually had people commenting from all the way from Madrid, Spain to the Philippines, Japan.
It was in the news in China.
Yes, it was in the news in China as well. It was all over the place.
Yeah.
And it didn't take very long for that to happen. We were just at different times I would Google my son's name just to see what would pop up, and there would be a new newspaper or new news organization or some other video that would pop up somewhere all over the place. It just blew my mind. It was
Almost unanimously in support of him.
yes.
There were a few out there saying, we shouldn't be giving out awards to people that don't earn it. But the overwhelming support was in favor of Logan being able to earn his Eagle Scout.
Very much so. And that's a good key point to make as well. Logan was doing the best he could. It wasn't like this was a participation trophy. We weren't looking to just say, hey, you know what? He's not going to be able to do it. Just give it to him anyway. Logan did the best he could do. As I made reference to it before, hiking. He's not going to hike a mile. You're not going to convince a 3-year-old to hike a mile. You're not going to convince my son to hike a mile. So he would do a couple hundred yards. And it would take some coaxing. It would take some working with him, take some things to try to do. But he would try it, and that's what he would do. Why? Because nobody in their right mind would hike a mile unless you had no choice behind it. So he was doing his best to do the best of his ability. And that was something that Glenn Beck mentioned as well in his interview with us, that this was not a participation thing. This was not us trying to say, hey, he's not going to get this. He deserves it anyway. He was trying. And we were very upfront with the Boy Scout organization from day one when he was a Cub Scout of what we could do, how we could do it, where we could, what could the Boy Scouts do for us, and this is what we've got. This is what we're dealing with. We had doctor's notes. We had geneticist comments on things, so that there was nothing hidden. We weren't being sneaky about it. We weren't being secretive about it. We were being upfront, brazen, and hey, we're in your face. We're here. This is what we want to do. Can you let us go this far? Let's go this far. And the whole time, yes, you bet. Go ahead, go for it.
Yeah. And we ended up suing the good people here in Utah that approved the project.
Yes. Yep. Because again, they're the second biggest council of boys in the Boy Scouts. If anybody should know the rules and the ins and outs of the Boy Scouts, it should have been them. Yeah. So
and we sued them for $1.
Yes, a whole $1. Which I'm still waiting for. No, I'm kidding. Yeah. But yeah, we so and that should hopefully
they paid me. I got it.
No, yeah,
he got it. I got your 50 cents.
Yeah, my lawyer got the $1, guys. That explains it all. No, but it was the principle of the matter. Alluding to what that very comment makes there is, we have had other scouts out there with mental disabilities text us, message us, Facebook us, however you want to put it, and thank us for not only pointing the way, but for bringing attention to this and motivating them to continue to go forward.
Did afterwards, did the Boy Scouts of America indicate to you that they would like your input on perhaps changing some of those rules? They
had specified that, that we should meet to talk through various things, and as you mentioned, it's now a year later.
Has anyone followed up with you from the Boy Scouts of America?
Not a peep.
Not a peep.
Yep.
So after that final press release that we had with them, because they had then allowed Logan to complete the projects if he desired.
Right.
Did he do that?
No.
And has the Boy Scouts of America reached out to either you or him since then?
Not at all. Not one bit. In fact, it's been ghostly quiet, as it were.
I think that's kind of shameful.
Well, I agree. And I think it's just one of those things that, it's a little flare-up that you just wanted to put behind them and say, okay, we've accommodated them. We showed them we have this website here. We've shown them here. Ted actually just handed me a recent document that they printed off. One of the points that we had pointed out to them was their terminology in them, that it needed to change.
They had been using the term retarded.
Yes, retarded was one. Another one here where they're talking about the merit badge requirements. Scouts with special needs must complete all merit badge requirements as written. That was supposed to have changed.
So it looks like it hasn't changed.
Right. I have no indication to me. I don't see anything in the documentation that I have been through, though it does say that it's now copyrighted for 2019. I'm still looking.
Now, they also took the position with us that, there are alternative things that he could do.
Right.
And the problem with that was?
If you can't do one thing, there's many times you can't do many things. And again, in Logan's case, if they talk about doing an alternative merit badge, Let's say, again, we use the example of hiking. Well, then let's have him do cooking. Well, he's not going to measure a cup of flour. He's going to have fun with the flour. You're going to have it all over the place, along with the eggs and along with everything else. He's going to have a blast, but you're not going to have a cookie that you're going to want to eat.
Yeah.
So there's no alternatives that work out for people with mental disabilities many times.
It's hard for me to go online and to figure out exactly what their position is on this, because there seems to be some stories where some kids with disabilities get through, but then you read their language here and it doesn't appear to be any different than what we were facing, other than they did remove the word retarded from their regulations.
Right. And what I think what you're encountering there is smaller councils or smaller groups of boys. For the Boy Scouts, they will just go ahead and say, you're getting the Eagle, we'll give you your Eagle. We're not going to necessarily, we'll push it up to national, but we'll whitewash it, if you will, just to make sure national doesn't push back. Why? Because your son deserves it. Or why? Because there's no reason that they should be excluded.
Now, the Boy Scouts' position was that in order to protect the integrity of the Eagle Scout Award, they need to have these high standards because, of course, there's Bill Gates is an Eagle Scout. There's Neil Armstrong was an Eagle Scout.
Yeah, Alan the engineer is an Eagle Scout.
Alan, our sound guy, is an Eagle Scout. Well, now I know it's watered down if Alan is an Eagle Scout. And they worried about that. And I just think that in this day and age, isn't that a little almost insane that they're worried about the integrity of that award when you have a child like Logan Blythe, who was so happy to be participating in it, and he was upset when it was taken away.
Yes, very true. We actually have pictures, and you'll see pictures online of Logan in his scout uniform with the biggest grin on his face you've ever seen. He was happy to be a part of the boys. One of the things that is very common when you have a child with special needs, or of course, with anybody and many children as well, that they're just looking for a way to interact with kids their own age. And for Logan, this was
hard for Logan.
Oh yeah,
period. Right.
Very much so. Very much so, because it was a way he could relate, and it was a way for the boys as well to help him achieve. So it worked both ways in a lot of ways.
Terrific.
It helped the boys. The boys wanted to participate more. His troop wanted to participate more. They wanted to help Logan out more, and in turn, Logan tried to achieve more and more and more and more. So this wasn't just going to be an Eagle Scout award for Logan. This was going to be an Eagle Scout for his troop.
The commercials coming up. Alan, do you have them muted? Okay, we are right on time. Last commercial break, I've got Chad Blythe with me, father of Logan Blythe, the famous Utah Boy Scout. And we'll be right back with our final segment. Stay tuned.
Down.
Welcome back to Talk with Ted, a show about nothing, number 20, Logan Blythe versus the Boy Scouts of America. And I'm chatting it up with my friend and former client, Chad Blythe, who was telling us about his boy's journey through the Boy Scouts. And I want to just back up a little bit, Chad. You and your wife, Diane, you live down in Payson.
Yes.
And you have Logan as your only child.
Correct.
How long have you lived in Utah?
5 years.
And was it? Did Logan participate in the Boy Scouts before moving to Utah?
Yes, he did. We were active we were actually Cub Scout leaders in Illinois, and he was active in the Cub Scouts. If you've ever heard of what's called a brag vest, it's that red vest that you saw.
Sure. That
you can actually put badges or that they earn on, and Logan's is covered in just everything that we managed to do in Illinois. And as his Cub Scout leaders, we made sure we jumped in there with both feet. And like I said, we're not quiet about things.
Yeah. And Logan has Down syndrome.
Yes.
And just incredibly coincidentally, we were on those news programs last year on International Down Syndrome Awareness Day.
Yes.
And your boy was the poster boy for that year. I truly believe he's a special kid. Can you tell us what types of things did you observe in him from his ability to participate in the Boy Scouts leading up to that awful time where they denied him the opportunity to earn his Eagle badge?
I noticed that he was more interested in participating. He was more interested in being with the boys. He was developing social skills, which is really what's most important when you have a child with special needs. You really want them to integrate as much as possible within society and to develop those social skills. And we saw him continue to progress. He continued to enjoy being around those boys. And the boys that he was with in his troop also enjoyed being around him. How
could you not enjoy being around him? He's such a great, happy, lively kid.
Yeah, he's a ham. What can I say?
Yeah.
He gets it all from his mom. Don't tell her I said that. Anyway, but he gained a lot of social interaction. He gained a lot of, not necessarily knowledge per se. I wouldn't say he would gain that, but he gained more of awareness.
Experience, maybe?
Experience, yes. And one of the things we have noticed in him, particularly over the last 2 or 3 years as well, being here in Utah, he's beginning to mature more. Though you can say he's cognitively at about a 4-year-old level, his maturity has grown past that. He's handling problems a little better. He's handling himself a little better. And I think all of that is a result of one of those things being the Boy Scouts and his interaction with the troop that he had here, the good friends that he made here. Prior to coming to Utah, I could not tell you who Logan's best friend was. I didn't think he would have a best friend per se. Here, I can name 2 or 3 boys. And as a parent, that means everything.
Yeah.
That I almost choke up thinking about how he has progressed and how Utah has embraced him.
Well, and speaking from my experience, I developed a relationship with your boy.
Yes.
And I could tell in his eyes he'd light up when he saw me.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And you and I spoke at my daughter's elementary school earlier this year.
Yes. That was fun.
And it's just it's great to see him because he just lights up. He's a real kid with real emotions and real growth and development. And
Yes.
And I know that you're proud of him.
Oh, thank you. And anybody that has dealt with people with special needs, whether it's cerebral palsy, autism, Down syndrome, you name it, many times they come away saying that these children or these individuals have such a love within them that it just knows no bounds. Logan literally knows no fear. Unless, of course, it's got to go to the doctor or a dentist or something. But he literally knows no fear, and he is very loving and kind. I jokingly tell people
He knew what we were doing too.
Yes, yeah, he was aware of what was going on, what was happening.
But you jokingly tell people I cut you off.
Yeah, but we'll talk about different things that he'll do. I'll jokingly refer to Logan. Logan's a hugger. I think Ted knows that as well. Logan's a hugger. And I'll tell people point blank, all his hugs are recycled. They come from his mother first. And to see those different things and the way he's been able to impact people. Just last year, it'll be a year now in May, that the Utah Senate made Logan an honorary senator.
We were there for that great celebration.
Yes, that was utterly amazing, having him being on the Capitol, being on the Senate floor.
And it was Senator DeBacchus that helped set that up.
Who's now running for mayor of Salt Lake City, by the way.
Oh, great.
Yeah. It was utterly unbelievable. It's just it. And what's really mind-blowing about stuff like that is he's now a person of record here in Utah. So 50 years from now, you may be accessing Utah records and Google Logan Blythe, and 9 times out of 10 you'll find him.
And you told me about the reception that he had that welcomed him after our event, like at the Special Olympics. He was treated like a little bit of a celebrity, it sounds like.
We just actually had another encounter with the Special Olympics this last week, where 2 weeks ago, where Logan got a silver medal again. In the basketball skills.
He's playing hoops.
Yep, he's playing hoops.
I love the kid more.
He walks onto the court, and we hear people going, "There he is! There he is! There he is!" It's a year later.
Logan Blythe.
Yeah, there he is. That's him. That's the boy. That's him. And he's a little, we'll say, a minor celebrity. I don't think he's quite the level of what you might consider a celebrity.
The term celebrity doesn't even fit him because he's just he's a major inspiration. is what he is.
Well, and I hope so. And that's why we did this. That's why the court case was put through. That's why we pursued this as we have.
So let's get particular. Now, he had gone through these different stages of the Boy Scouts and earned these different badges, and then it came time for him to attempt to earn the Eagle Badge.
Yes.
And to do that, you have to come up with some type of project or a proposal.
Correct, yes.
And what was his proposal, his proposed project?
Well, his mom and I came up with the idea of doing newborn kits for the hospital there in Payson, Mountain View Hospital. Something that would be uniquely suited to Logan, because Logan will work with his mom. His mom's a great sewer. She loves sewing, loves doing all those things that way, and was going to actually make the blankets that were going to be included there. And I actually have video of him sitting with his mom working the sewing machine. And then we were going to have his troop.
Was he wearing his vest with all his patches?
No, yeah, not quite. He was wearing a Harley shirt, actually.
Okay.
But and we were going to have his troop come over, help us package those kits, work with us in getting those kits distributed.
The other boys were going to help him?
Yes, we had that already set up. Several of his now best friends were going to come over with their troop and work at doing it up, getting it all set to go. We had that all in line. We were ready, and when all it was really needed was the approval. And so when we got that approval, we let everybody know, hey, it's on.
Let's just let that sink in for a moment, right? Because this is what really struck me as sort of most outrageous about the case. Well, aside from the failing to get the false hope and then tell him that he couldn't do it, but the nature of that project, the Boy Scouts of America said, no, we will not acknowledge that work to bring these gift packages to families of newborns as sufficient enough to warrant acknowledgement from our institution.
Yes, yeah, that's I can't explain that one. That's one of those things that you just look at and go, okay, is there?
What are you all about then?
Right? Is there an ulterior motive? And I think you touched on it a moment ago, where the Boy Scouts may have been trying to keep that prestige of an Eagle Scout. I don't know. There are Eagle Scouts that have Down syndrome. They are higher functioning than Logan is, but they exist. They're out there. So
I just can't imagine that it would take away from anyone.
I don't think so, especially if you know Logan. If you have any idea about Logan, you would think it would edify that award more than anything.
And even more than Logan, the institution itself, because that's how that institution's acting, and yet they're the institution that are supposed to be instilling these great values on the young men and now women in the country.
Very true, yes.
What the hell is going on?
Yeah, very true. Again, it's looking at, one of the things you talk about, especially with the Special Olympics, is inclusion, where you're looking to just include. You don't have to accommodate many times. You just want to include those with special needs. You don't have to make special requirements for them. You don't have to do special things for them. They just want to be included. And you would think the Boy Scouts would understand that, would have understood that from day one, especially when we were raising the flags, when we were talking to the people that we were talking to, that here is, first of all, an active family in the Boy Scouts with an active son with special needs that just wants to have that inclusion.
And is doing a beautiful thing and is benefiting from it tremendously.
Right. And to continue to move forward.
Yeah, and benefiting others.
Right, exactly. And teaching, again, illustrating what you would think the Boy Scout organization is about. I don't know. That just leaves me.
So we sued him for $1.
Yes.
We then met with the, was it the National Commissioner?
Yes.
And you had been invited, or there was some offer that maybe you would participate in helping change the rules around the Boy Scouts, and we spoke earlier, that hasn't happened, right?
Correct, yes.
There was also, I believe that the Boy Scouts initially gave a little bit of a misleading statement saying that his earlier badges had not been revoked.
Right. That's where the left hand wasn't paying attention to what the right hand was doing. From the National Parks Council,
they made it sound like we were mistaken.
Right. That we were completely wrong, and yet, I mean, I kept the text, I kept the email
Sure.
that told me, sorry, no. He's not going. And we walked right up to him. It's like, really? Then what's this?
And so they backtracked a little bit, and then they told us that Logan could complete, that his project would be approved.
Yes.
Did Logan ever do that?
No. We actually, at that point in time, we had already done the project for ourselves.
You went ahead and did it anyway, even though the BSA wasn't going to acknowledge it for an Eagle Scout. Your boy went ahead and gave those gift packages out at the hospital to the newborn families.
Yes, we did. We went ahead and did that.
Did he do it with the help of other kids in the Boy Scouts?
Not particularly. No, it was just us.
Just
it was
you
just
guys.
just the family, and of course his several, one or two little friends that were with us as well. And basically, it was one of those kinds of things where it was going to be this grandiose affair, if you will, and we were going to have where we could actually distribute those to the individual newborns and so forth. At that time, it was just a matter of we just brought it to them and gave it.
And how was it? Was it still a beautiful thing? I bet the families appreciated it.
I believe so, yes. And
They probably didn't care if it was endorsed by the Boy Scouts of America. Or
not at all. They were more interested that it was a special needs boy that was doing it.
He's a beautiful kid. You got a beautiful kid.
Oh, well, thank you. Again, that comes from his mom's side.
But some people feel like that's unlucky to have a kid with special needs.
I would disagree with that. The main reason I would say, as I mentioned a little bit ago, they are some of the most loving and caring individuals that you'll ever encounter. Yes, when you have a child with special needs, the peaks are going to be exceptionally higher, and those valleys are going to get really, really low.
It's not easy.
It's not easy, not at all. But at the same time, you spend a lot of your time just looking at it, and you realize why you're doing it. Every parent will tell you how much they cherish a hug from their child, how much they cherish when the child walks up to them and tells them they love them. When Logan gives you a hug, his speech delay really doesn't tell. He has a hard time telling you he loves you. He has a hard time conveying that a little bit because he doesn't totally understand that concept. But boy, when he tries to, you can see it as clear as day, and it will almost reduce you to tears.
I have personally felt it more than once from him, and I know for a fact that what we were doing was not lost on him.
No, it's very true. He knew something was happening. He knew that there was this big circus, if you will, going on around him. And at different points in time where Ted, the various reporters, the various individuals would comment on Logan and say how well behaved he was or how well he was handling himself, he knew something. He knew what was going on, and he was relishing it. He was loving it. And a kind of a joking comment there. One of the female reporters he actually flirted with a little bit.
Nicole Val, he was in love with her.
Yes, he was a little smitten there. So that was one of those fun little pieces.
Hey, Chad, I think we're out of time. I think the commercials are coming on here. It's great to see you again. Please tell Diane and Logan I said hello. And folks, thanks for listening. I'll be back on Thursday with Common Ground with Outmark Shirtlift, and next week on Talk with Ted number 21, I'll have Davis County Prosecutor Troy Rawlings. So that's going to be a good one. Tune in, and thanks for listening.